So today what we're going to do is talk about smoothing the curve using means. Now, you may or may not remember that a mean is simply what we usually think of as an average. Of course, it's a specific type of average. That's the one where you take the sum of the items and divide it by the number of items. So it's the one we often use when we're just talking about grades, etc. And I want to talk to you a little bit about something specific using something that you're very familiar with. If you think about your grades, for example, let's say that you made a 50, that you made a 100, and then you made another 100. Okay? Well, if you took the sum of those grades, so you get 250, and then you divide it by the number of grades that you have, then you're going to get a number that represents but does not exactly identify what really happened, because you're going to get about 83. But if you look at your original grades, you had two really good scores. It's just this one poor score that is pulling your average or your grade down. But what's happening here, though, is that we're able to see a more distinct pattern of what happens. So if just by looking at the raw data, you may think this is an amazing student, get perfect scores on two of the tests. But they're not so amazing if you think of the fact that they got just half the credit on one of the tests. So this gives a baseline somewhere in between. So it shows that this student does do good work, but not always. All right? So you see that an average can smooth out those really high points and the really low points, and so you get something in the middle. So keep that in mind as we talk about what's going to happen today, what we're going to be looking at with these smoothing means. Okay? So we're going to go to the book and look at a couple of different means here. So we're talking about smoothing a time series using what are called moving means. Moving because we're going to be doing several of them across the lines, right? They don't actually move, but it's going to move the line, and we're going to be moving across doing these. So what we want to do, again, is we want to take that raw data, which can be all over the place, and use this process to be able to smooth the lines so that we get a straighter line to be able to see if there really are trends or seasonal movements, etc. And there are a couple of them we're going to look at. The first one we're going to look at is something called a three-moving mean. And when you see that number there, that word 3, that just means we're going to be using 3 values, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to use a value and then numbers on either side. So you're going to have a value and then the value of 2 neighbors, one on each side. They have to be consecutive, and you have to have them on each side, which means you're never going to be able to use the first and last number. For example, say you have this set of numbers. Here's a number with 2 numbers on either side. So therefore, I could use the 2 as my middle number, right? But I can't use the 1 to get a 3-moving mean as the middle number because there is no number on the side of it. So you're going to see that as one of the restrictions. I just want you to make sure that you can't use every single value when you're working with these. So I could use 2, I could use 3, I could use 4. I couldn't use 1 and 5, those data points as the centers, to get a moving mean for those, because you have to have 3 values. And remember that you can call these using subscripts. We can identify these. Half the battle in mathematics is learning to read the notation. So if this is the first one, this is the second number, this is the third one, this is the fourth one, etc. Right? So we're using y values, and so we use y sub 1. Those subscripts just tell you where they come from. So the first one, second one, third one, etc. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So all we're going to do then is take 3 of them and add them up and divide by 3 to get the number. Now, a 3-point moving mean is good, but as you can imagine, the more values you have, the better your data is going to be. So you can also use the 5 moving mean. Now again, the number part of it just simply means that that's how many values you're going to have. Okay? And again, remember you've got to have values on both sides. So in this particular case, the only value I could use for a 5 number mean would be here, because I need 2 values on either side if there's going to be 5 of them. So that would be the only one we could use. So in a small set of data, 5 moving mean really doesn't give you any information. Okay? So, but if you do have a lot of pieces of data, then a 5 moving mean would give you more information, a better curve, which you'll see an example of in just a moment. Okay? You could also, if you had huge sets of data, you could use a 7, 9, 11, doesn't matter how many points, but you'll notice that they're always odd numbers. Because if you use an even set of numbers, then you're going to run into a problem that we'll talk about in just a moment. So we're going to look at just finding a few of these. They're very easy to use if you have your calculator especially. So let's just pop over to an example. Here we go. We have some days of the week and some temperatures. We want to calculate the 3 mean smooth temperature for Tuesday. And I can do Tuesday because there's Monday and Wednesday on either side of it. I couldn't do Monday because there's no value before it, right? So I could do Tuesday. So all I need to do is take these 3 values. So here they are. We're going to write down the 3 values, which is what they've done. And then we're going to add them together and divide, of course, by 3 since we're taking the 3 moving mean. So there you go, adding them together, dividing by 3, and you get a mean of 23.1. So the 3 mean smooth temperature for Tuesday is 23.1. And what it does is, instead of just using the raw data for this point, we're now considering the other data points in relation to it. And again, in a moment, you're going to see the graph of these, and you're going to see what that does and how that helps you. Now, if you were doing the 5 temperature centered on Thursday, again, we can do it on Thursday because it has 2 values either side, because we need 5 values with the one we're looking at in the middle. Again, just add up those 5 values, and this time, of course, you're going to divide by 5, which gives you 18.4. And if you look at Thursday's actual value of 13, 18 seems very far away from it. But again, remember, we're trying to determine a trend here of all of these temperatures. So the other temperatures in this case pulled it up a little bit from its actual value, but it gives you a better comparison of the relation between the values. Okay? So it is going to change the values, but don't panic about that. Now let's see what that does to us. When you look at the data here, look at this graph, the red line represents the raw data. And if you look at the raw data, you can see that it's all over the place. Now, we could draw a line from there to there, and that a trend line, and that trend line looks as if there's a slight increase, perhaps, but it's so flat that it would be difficult to say it. But if we were saying we're giving this a trend, we may say that there's a trend that this is slightly increasing as we move through time. But it's so little that it almost looks constant. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those means to smooth the line. Literally, you'll see that it takes all of the bumps out of the line. And the first one that they did with the yellow line, as you'll see there, the yellow line smoothed the curve somewhat. So you can see that when you compare it to the red line, it doesn't have as many highs and lows. So the 3 moving mean smoothed it somewhat. Now, and if you look at this line, it still looks like it might go slightly above. It might have a slight increasing trend, but are you starting to see that it really doesn't so much? Okay, and then we can continue that by looking at the 5 mean, and that's this blue line. And look at what happens here. When you do the 5-number mean, even though we're cutting off data points, right, because we can't use the ones at the ends, doesn't really matter. We're just looking for the overall trend. If you look at that, it really starts higher than it finishes. So in reality, this thing doesn't have any trend. It's almost flat. And again, the only way we could see that, though, was to get rid of all of those highs and lows, those peaks and valleys, by using the moving mean. So it just gives us a way to analyze the data that makes much more sense. Okay? And again, the bigger the number you can use, the nicer your curve is going to be. Now, don't think that that means it's always going to show that there is no relationship, because that's not the case. This could just as easily, not this particular one, but you could just as easily end up with a smooth line going straight up like this, which would show that it was indeed increasing. So it can prove that you were correct just as easily as it can prove that your original observation might have been a little off. Okay? So it smooths out those middles and makes it a lot easier to analyze the data. Now, as you can imagine, some data points aren't going to give you enough pieces to be able to do this. So we have to think a little bit more about another process. This is the easiest one to use, but we could use also a two-mean smoothing. The problem with two-mean smoothing is that if I do the mean for Monday and Tuesday, the mean for those two data points is not going to give me either Monday or Tuesday values. It's going to give me something in between. And I'm not allowed to do that. I need to be able to graph. If it's Monday and Tuesday, I need to put a dot for Monday and I need to put a dot for Tuesday on my graph, right? Remember when we were looking at those? I don't have values. There is no day in between Monday and Tuesday. So what I have to do is I still have to consider 3 values, and I'm just going to do each one independently. So let me show you what I mean by that. So there's a little more math, but again, it's easy math you can do on your calculator. So if I was trying to center this on Tuesday, I would have to find the mean of Monday and Tuesday. Then I would have to find the mean of Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the mean of those 2 values, right? To get it back in the middle, to get it back to a Tuesday value. Okay, so let me show you a little chart that makes this a little clearer. It's a little less math in some sides, but more in others. So here we go. We have our 3 days. If I do Monday and Tuesday, you'll see that they just did the mean of those 2 values and gives you 21.45. But that would be the value between 2 values. We don't have a day in there. But if I do Tuesday and Wednesday, I'll get a value between those 2. And if I take the mean of those 2 values, those 2 moving means, what happens is it gives me one of them that's in the middle. And if you look at in the middle, we're back to Tuesday. So you have to be careful with these values. We can't be putting values in between. There is no value for between Monday and Tuesday. There's a value for Monday, there's a value for Tuesday, there's a value for Wednesday. So we have to get back to centered on one of those days so that we can then plot this point. These 2 points don't have corresponding days, therefore they don't exist. So we have to take the mean of those 2 values. Okay? Now, just be careful when you're doing the even ones. That means you have to do it more times. So let's just look at a quick example here. So we have our days. Calculate the 2 mean smooth temperature for Tuesday with centering. Because again, if you do 2 means, you're going to have to center it. So you're going to have to do the mean below Tuesday, so Monday and Tuesday. You're going to have to do the mean above, so Tuesday and Wednesday. And then you're going to have to take the mean of those 2 values. And that will give you the smooth temperature for Tuesday. Okay? Now, You're not going to have to decide which one is the best to do for these. You're going to have to have to be able to make these computations. So they'll tell you which value that they want you to use. You can also use a 4 moving mean, but again, because it's an even number, it's going to give you a number between the two values, so that means you're going to have to do it more than once. So let's look at an example of that. So if it's centered on Thursday, right, then we're going to calculate the first 4 values for those. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, 4 values, and then divide by 4 gives us a mean, but it throws our value between Wednesday and Thursday because we were using all 4 of these values, and we can't have that. So what we have to do is then calculate another one on this side, and then the two means of those to give us the value between. So it becomes a little more complicated, right? You have to take the mean of the two means. But it does give you very good, clean data. But if you look, it's the same data we had before, and it's the same data point we got, 18.1, as when we did the 5 number smooth mean before for that same set of data. So you have the odd number ones are the better ones to use if you have the choice. Okay? Now, clearly, you don't want to do this for a huge set of data. So you can do this smoothing using Excel. And I want you to practice this using Excel. And using Excel will make your life a lot easier. To do Excel with these values, you're simply going to make a chart, and you're going to have 2 columns. You'll have your days of the week, and you'll have your temperature in this case, because that's what we're measuring, days of the week and temperature, putting in those values. If you're using a 3 moving mean, then you're simply going to select these 3 temperatures. You're going to use these 3 cells, and of course divide by 3, so you'll enter that formula. And then it'll calculate the moving mean, the 3 moving mean for you. Okay? You can copy that formula into the other cells. Again, not on Sunday because it doesn't have a day beyond it. Not on Monday because it doesn't have a day beyond it. But all of the days in between those that have days either side, you could copy that same formula, and it would give you the moving mean for each one of those days. Same thing for the 5 temperature moving mean, except that you'd have to use 5 values, and of course the first 2 won't have a value, and the last 2 won't have a value. When you do that, you can then have Excel graph those, and you'll have your original data points, your 3 smoothed mean, and your 5 smoothed mean. And if you look at this particular thing, what happens is, from here to here, it looks as if this graph is these values are actually increasing over time. But when you do the 3 mean, it looks like it's actually decreasing over time. But when you do the 5 mean value, you can see that they don't change that much in relation to the start to finish. All right, there's really not that much change in those temperatures, which we would expect just for the temperatures for 1 week. You wouldn't expect that there to be an overall trend that Mondays are always cooler than Fridays, right? But as you go on Monday to Friday, that you would get a warming trend. That's just not the way it works, right? Okay, so different ways of being able to smooth the line so that we can find out more information. You need to be able to read these, but you also need to be able to calculate these. So that's what we're gonna spend some time doing in the exercises. You're going to be doing some exercises where you're going to be calculating these, and I'm going to give you one where you're going to have to use Excel to be able to make the values. That way you can put those values in. And again, that's much easier when you have large data points to be able to find the answers. Okay, now they give you quite a lot of these. I'm not going to give you all of them, but I do want you to do some. Now, this is the first time where we've had actual calculated answers, which means that when we arrive on our next class is on Monday. When we arrive on Monday, the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to discuss some of these. So I'm going to pull up the problem here, and we're going to look at number 1, and I'm going to walk you through it. I want you to tell me for finding the 3 mean smooth temperature, what are the steps? And remember, I didn't write them down this time, but they're in the section, and the section notes. We've talked about each one. So what are the steps for finding the 3 mean smooth temperature for Wednesday? Well, that means Wednesday, we're going to be using the values on either side of it. So we'll be using Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll take the mean of those 3 numbers, and you're going to get the value that's closest to it. Okay? So I expect you to walk with me through these, which means that I will be calling on you by name. So that means between now and then, you need to get some of these done, right? Or at least be willing to work with me in class. So we'll be working to do these. We'll probably do the first one together just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then we'll do some work together in class. Okay? All right. Normally we would do that with the video, but we're doing the video together today. Right? So, for homework, let's see what we've got here. Easy peasy. 7, 2 mean smooth, meaning, remember, with the even ones you have to do it twice. That's a lot of them. That's pretty nice, though. All right, so we can probably just go to a couple of these and get it all done at one time. Nope, no means. Okay. So what I'd like you to do for homework is I'd like you to do number 4. And number 8. Absolutely. So 4 and 8 will give you enough to practice these to see that you've done it. Now, you can certainly do more, and if you're having difficulty, then that's exactly what you need to do. So, but for homework, we'll do numbers 4 and 8. And again, I'll post that on your Spire so you don't have to memorize which ones we're doing, but you should obviously be writing on that and all the notes that we took as well. Okay?